Hi everybody, welcome to Strategy 6 in the Talk Time Toddler course. This strategy is reducing questions. So it doesn't say no questions, just reducing it. So I'm asking less questions because the goal of this strategy is to create a more relaxed environment where I'm not quizzing my child. I want to reduce the environmental demands or the amount of information their brain has to process, because there's lots of ways and alternatives to questions where I'm still providing a language-rich environment and they're still hearing lots of language and new vocabulary and vocabulary that they know without asking questions. So a perfect example of that is choices, or I'm commenting on what they're doing, or I'm naming items, or I'm narrating what I'm doing or what they're doing. Right? So there's lots of alternatives to reducing questions that are very effective, and we're going to dive a little bit more deeper into that. So firstly, the agenda for today. What is reducing questions? The science behind this strategy, why use it, putting it into practice, and some common questions about this strategy. So what is it? It's asking less questions. So let's make the distinction right away. It's completely okay and important that you still ask your child questions, but let me give you a perfect example about how you can reduce the amount of questions. So I'm going to give you an example where I'm asking lots of questions in a row, and we can kind of brainstorm how the child might feel. So let's pretend that a child has a toy and they come up to me. I say, "What is that? Wait, where did you get that? Wait, why is it red?" All right, so I asked 3 questions back to back. If I think about how much information that the child's brain has to process with those 3 questions, they might and are likely missing information, right? I didn't even give them a chance to answer the first question before I gave them 2 more. So if I'm asking a question, I'm being a little bit more thoughtful about, what is that? 5 to 10 seconds, see if they respond. If they don't, I'm giving them a choice, like we talked about in our choices strategy, to help them learn new vocabulary. Is it a dinosaur or is it a truck? So I'm decreasing demands, or the amount of information their brain has to process, by asking less questions. And like I mentioned previously, I can make comments or offer choices instead. So they come up to me, instead of me saying, "What is that?" which would be an appropriate response if I ask one question and embrace that pause time. But I could say, "Whoa, that's a spiky dinosaur." I'm commenting. Or maybe I'm offering a choice. "Whoa, is it tall or short?" Right? And then I can use my expansion strategy like we previously talked about. So the key here is to shift from asking frequent questions to making observations and offering comments and choices instead. The science behind this strategy. A study by Chenard found that children engaged in more productive language interactions when adults commented on their activities rather than asking them questions. So by commenting, adults provide lots of language input for children, offering them opportunities to learn new words and concepts. So I don't necessarily have to ask my child a question or quote unquote quiz them for them to hear lots of language. And so what they meant by productive language interactions is children used more words and there was more back and forth, because there's less pressure. And when there's less pressure, it's common for children to talk more because they feel more confident. I like to think of it as I'm taking some of the pressure for them to answer my questions off, and we can kind of just speak freely, right? And I'm focusing on using my other strategies to provide them with lots of language. So why use Let Your Child Lead? Number 1, lowered pressure. I'm minimizing the pressure on my child to respond, making language learning more enjoyable. Increased exposure. So I'm offering more opportunities for my child to hear, learn new words and concepts. Whoa, that's a big dinosaur. Whoa, that's a fast car. I see the boy is smiling. Right? So when I give those examples, reframe it of, that's a different way to put it than asking, "What's the boy's face look like?" Oh, I can just say the boy is smiling, and I can see what my child says. So I'm not quizzing what my child knows, but rather I'm making sure that they're hearing lots of high quality language. And then better understanding. So I'm helping my child understand their surroundings better through descriptive language. So especially when my child is learning some more of those learning descriptive words and vocabulary. So when I'm thinking about like big, small, fast, slow, more, less, it's a great opportunity for me to give them lots of opportunities to hear and learn new language that they might not independently be using themselves. And I would miss out on exposing them to this language if I just quiz them with those what, where, why, when questions, right? Because they need to hear this more specific language and vocabulary to learn it. So it's really about language exposure. So putting it into practice, I'm focusing on using descriptive comments, and I've given some examples of that. So I'm commenting on what my child is doing, playing with, feeling, and seeing instead of asking questions about it. Some alternative to asking questions is choices, and I offer lots and lots of choices. In our choices presentation, we talked about how you can use choices across many daily activities to teach your child basically any word and build upon the vocabulary that they already have. So I'm presenting options to my child that is encouraging decision making without the pressure of questions. And then I put narrate activities. Now this is a great strategy. In the baby course, I have 2 presentations about sports commentator talk. So where I'm acting as a sports commentator, like in a sports game, where they're narrating the actions and feelings and what the players on the field are doing, or the court. I'm doing the same thing, but I'm acting like my child is, I'm commenting on what my child is doing, thinking, and feeling. Whoa, you're stacking the blocks. Ooh, you put it under the table? Right? A great way to expose my child to lots of language while reducing the pressure. Same with self-talk, where I'm narrating my own actions. It's a great way to expose my child to lots of language and help them pair my actions and my feelings to words. So an example is, if my child is playing with a toy car, instead of asking, "What are you doing?" I could comment with, "You're driving the car fast on the track." So you can see the distinction, and there's lots of different variations of comments I could make. So really make it relevant to your child's language development level. So if my child is independently using 1 or 2 words, right, maybe they say car fast or car go, maybe I expand upon it and I comment with 3 to 4 word utterance. So if they say car go, I could say, "Yeah, the car goes fast." Right? So you can see the comment I could make that is just above their current level of what they can independently do, but I'm just helping model a slightly more complex version for them to hear so that they can do the same as they continue to progress. Same thing, if my child is producing 5 or 6 words and they say, "The car goes fast," I could say, "Yeah, the car goes fast under the bridge and around the track. Ooh, it even jumps high." So I can make my language more complex based on where my child is at. And that's really highly dependent on your child and their current place in the language development process. So there's lots of variation. So some pro tips, just like tying it back to the previous presentation and strategy, let your child lead. This is going to be very effective when I mirror their interests. So I'm reducing questions specifically related to mirroring their interests, meaning if I'm commenting and offering choices and narrating, I'm following their interests and paying attention to statements that will catch their attention and that will make them excited to use language and share their thoughts. And I'm also being patient and attentive. So I'm going with the natural flow of conversation and I'm paying attention to what my child is interested in. Some common questions I get about using the reducing questions strategy is, how do I avoid asking questions? So again, it's not necessarily that you have to avoid asking questions altogether, but you're just practicing turning questions into statements and observations. It's a great way to make your child feel heard as well. Can I ask some questions? Yes, of course, but balance them with comments and descriptions and choices. What if my child doesn't respond to comments? That's completely okay because the goal is language exposure. The goal is for them to hear lots of language because, again, they need to hear this language and this vocabulary to learn it. That's how children learn language, right? Repetition and hearing the same words and phrases in the same daily routines and activities. So, embracing a new communication style. This can be tricky because adapting the way that we communicate with our children can take a little bit of time and practice. That's completely okay. So, again, I'm focusing on less pressure and just lots of language exposure. Some closing thoughts. So again, just like the previous presentations, I would recommend printing off the reducing questions strategy page, laminating it, putting it somewhere where you're going to see it so that it's on your mind. You're thinking about how you can reframe questions into comments and descriptions. And kind of summarizing again, it really is a great way to create a relaxed learning environment. If we take off some of the pressure to communicate, right? So that say more, say the word, say more if you want to get it. If we reduce that pressure, just like the same way with reducing questions, it's more likely that our child is actually going to communicate more, which is what we want, because then we can build upon it. We're making them feel confident. So if you have any other questions, again, go check out those over 40 daily activities that give specific examples of how you could use reducing questions during daily routines. If you have any other questions, please reach out to me and we can brainstorm together how you can use this strategy, and I can answer any of those questions. So I appreciate it. I'll see you all in the next presentation.